The cold winds of the north followed Arya Stark as she rode toward Dragonstone. She had not planned to go there at first. Her heart was set on returning to Winterfell, to Sansa and Bran, but something deep inside her told her to change course. Something more than just curiosity. Maybe it was the thought of seeing Jon again, her half-brother who had always treated her like his own. Or maybe it was the name Daenerys Targaryen, the Dragon Queen who now stood beside him. Arya had heard rumors, dragons, armies, fire, and blood, and she wanted to see it all for herself. When she arrived at Dragonstone, Arya was not welcomed like a guest. The Unsullied stood in her way, cold and unmoving. But when Jon saw her, his face broke into a smile that Arya had not seen in years. He ran to her, arms wide, and for a moment all the pain and death they had both faced seemed to melt away. They hugged tightly, both too proud to cry, but the silence between them spoke louder than words. "You look different," Jon said finally. "So do you," Arya replied, giving him a small smirk. "But you still smell like a stable boy." Jon laughed. "And you still talk like a wolf with a sharp tongue." They sat together, and Jon introduced her to Daenerys. The Dragon Queen watched Arya with curious eyes, not unkind, but cautious. Arya returned the look. She didn't trust easily, and she had grown used to masks, both real and fake. Daenerys, though beautiful and powerful, had something behind her eyes that made Arya uneasy. Fire. Not just the fire of dragons, something darker. Daenerys greeted her politely, even warmly. "You are welcome here, Arya of House Stark." Arya gave a nod. "And you, Daenerys of House Targaryen." The next few days, Arya watched and listened. She saw how Jon and Daenerys talked late into the night, how they planned their next move against Cersei. Arya hated the Lannister queen with every bone in her body. She had been on her list for years, but now things had changed. Arya was no longer a lone killer in the dark. She was part of something bigger now. Maybe. One night, Arya stood on a cliff, watching the sea crash against the rocks below. She heard footsteps. It was Daenerys. "You don't like me," the queen said softly, not as a question. Arya shrugged. "I don't know you." Daenerys nodded. "But you don't trust me?" Arya looked at her. "I trust my brother." Daenerys smiled. "So do I." They stood in silence for a while. Arya could feel the heat of the dragons nearby, even in the cold wind. It was strange. Fire and ice together in one place. Later that night, Arya walked through the war room. She looked at the map of Westeros spread across the table. Jon and Daenerys were planning an attack on King's Landing. Arya saw how careful Jon was, how he wanted to avoid killing innocents. Daenerys, though, was different. She talked of justice, of breaking chains, but her voice grew sharper when she spoke of Cersei. Arya had heard voices like that before, people who believed they were right, no matter the cost. That night, Arya made a decision. She would stay, not just to help fight Cersei, but to keep watch. She trusted Jon, but she didn't trust the fire in Daenerys' eyes. When Jon told her about the truth, that he was Aegon Targaryen, true heir to the Iron Throne, Arya said nothing at first. Then she looked him in the eyes. "Do you want the throne?" "No," Jon replied. "Then don't let her burn everything to get it." Jon looked troubled, torn between duty and love. Arya saw it. She felt it. A storm was coming, one that might burn them all, and she would be ready. The mood in Dragonstone had changed. Arya could feel it in the air, thicker than fog, heavier than steel. Jon had changed ever so slightly since learning the truth about his birth. He spoke less, stared out to sea more, as if looking for answers in the waves. Daenerys had changed too. Not on the outside. She still wore her silver braid, still walked with the pride of a queen. But inside, Arya saw the shift. Her smiles were thinner, her voice colder. The fire in her was no longer just about freeing the people. Now, it seemed personal. Arya wasn't a talker, but she was always watching. She noticed the way Daenerys looked at Jon, not just with love, but with expectation, as if she was waiting for him to bend fully, not just the knee, but the heart. And Jon, loyal to the end, looked torn, caught between love and fear. Between who he was raised to be and who he was born to be. One morning, Arya followed Daenerys through the halls of Dragonstone, silent as a shadow. She kept to the stone walls, hidden from view. She saw Daenerys enter a room with Tyrion and Varys already waiting. Arya stayed close enough to hear. "She hesitates," Daenerys said, her voice sharp. "Arya Stark, she watches me like a hawk." "She's loyal to Jon," Tyrion replied carefully, "as is Sansa." Daenerys narrowed her eyes. "And if Jon ever thinks I'm a danger, where do you think his loyalty will go?" Varys spoke then, voice low. "Your Grace, I must remind you, fear and love rarely live in the same house." There was a pause. Then Daenerys spoke again, slower this time. "I won't lose the throne to a man who doesn't even want it. If the North stands in my way, I will burn the path clear." Arya's blood ran cold. She left quietly, her heart pounding. For a moment, the old Arya returned, the one who whispered names before sleep, the one who moved in darkness with a blade in hand. For the first time since arriving, she felt something dangerous rise in her chest. Daenerys was not the enemy, not yet. But Arya knew how quickly people changed when power was at their fingertips. She had seen it in Walder Frey. She had seen it in Cersei. And now she saw the edges of it in the Dragon Queen. Up from a pile of maps, tired and distracted. "We need to talk," Arya said bluntly. Jon sighed. "If it's about Daenerys, she's ready to burn cities," Arya cut in. "She said it herself." Jon frowned. "You're spying on her?" "I'm protecting you," she snapped. "I'm protecting us." Jon stood, voice low but firm. "She's not the enemy. She will be if she starts acting like one." Jon looked at her, torn. She's lost a lot, her friends, her people. She's angry, but she still wants to do the right thing. Arya shook her head. "Angry queens with dragons don't do the right thing. They do what feels right thing. They do what feels right to them. There's a difference." They stood in silence, the weight of the war pressing down on them. Arya's voice softened. "I'm not saying we turn against her. Not yet, but don't be blind, Jon. Promise me you won't be blind." Jon nodded slowly. "I promise." Arya left, unsure if he truly meant it. The next morning, Daenerys announced they would attack King's Landing in 2 weeks. Arya watched her closely during the meeting. Her eyes glowed like wildfire when she spoke of justice. But it wasn't justice anymore, it was revenge. As they left the war room, Arya stayed behind and stared at the map. Her fingers rested on King's Landing. So many innocents, so many lives. She heard soft steps behind her. "Tyrion." "She worries you too," Arya said without turning. Tyrion sighed. "She worries all of us, but she also gives us hope. That's the dangerous part." Arya looked at him. "Hope is a pretty word. Fire's prettier. But both can kill if you're not careful." They stood there, silent allies in a growing storm. Arya knew the time would come when she'd have to choose, her brother or the Queen. And if the Queen chose fire, Arya Stark would be ready with steel. Dragonstone began to feel like a cage. Arya was never one to stay still, and the walls, no matter how grand or ancient, were closing in on her. But it wasn't just the stone, It was the people. The silence between Jon and Daenerys grew louder each day, and Arya could see the cracks forming beneath their polished smiles. When they stood together before the council, they looked like king and queen. But in private, they were two people torn apart by truth and destiny. Arya spent most of her time alone now, walking through the halls, watching unsullied soldiers train, studying the dragons from a distance. Rhaegal's eyes met hers once, deep and ancient. Arya didn't flinch. She wondered what the beast saw in her. Death, maybe. She wasn't afraid. One evening, Arya joined Jon on the beach. The tide was low, and the waves whispered secrets as they crashed against the rocks. Jon stood there like a statue, his hair wild in the wind, cloak dragging behind him. "She won't stop," Arya said softly. Jon didn't ask who, he knew. "She still believes it's her destiny," he replied. "She thinks the Iron Throne will fix everything." Arya glanced at him. "You think it will break her?" Jon looked down. "I think it already has." The wind howled between them. Arya's hand rested on Needle's hilt, not out of fear, just habit. "Varys wants to spread the truth," Jon admitted suddenly. "About me, about who I am." Arya's eyes narrowed. "Will you let him?" Jon didn't answer. "You should," Arya said. "Let the people know what kind of king they could have. Then let them choose. I don't want the throne." "I know. That's why you'd be good at it." Jon looked at her, pained. "If I do that, she'll see it as betrayal." Arya gave him a hard look. "Then maybe she doesn't deserve your loyalty." The next morning something changed. The sky was thick with smoke. Arya ran up the stairs to the cliffs and saw it, a ship, burning on the horizon. Grey Worm confirmed it later. Varys had tried to send a raven. Someone had caught him. Someone had told Daenerys. That night Arya saw Varys executed, burned alive by dragonfire. Arya didn't flinch, but her heart grew colder. She stood beside Jon as the flames roared. Daenerys didn't look away once. Her face was calm, like she was brushing ash off her sleeve. No grief, no doubt, only purpose. After the execution, Jon tried to speak to her in private. Arya followed, unseen. "I didn't want this," Jon said quietly. "You promised." "I promised justice," Daenerys interrupted. "He betrayed me. He spread lies." "They weren't lies." Her voice turned sharp. "And what would you have me do, Jon? Let him take the throne from me? Let your name replace mine in the songs?" Jon stepped back, hurt. "That's not what this is about." Daenerys moved closer, voice soft but tight. "Then bend. Not just your knee, your heart. Be with me. Rule with me." Jon looked lost. Arya turned away before she could see more. She found Tyrion later in the hall, drinking alone. "She's not going to stop," Arya said. "I know," he muttered. "And we're all too afraid to say it." Arya sat beside him. "Not me." Tyrion looked at her with weary eyes. "What will you do?" Arya thought for a long moment. "Watch. Wait. Strike if I must." Tyrion chuckled bitterly. "You're more dangerous than a dragon." Arya didn't smile. The next morning, they prepared for war. The fleet was ready. The Unsullied stood in formation. Daenerys climbed atop Drogon, her eyes locked on the horizon. Arya rode with Jon. She wore dark leather and carried not just needle, but a hidden dagger, the one that once tried to end Bran's life. A gift from chaos. She had kept it for a reason. As the ships moved toward King's Landing, Arya's heart pounded, not with fear, but with a deep, quiet dread. This wasn't just war anymore. This was a test of fire and blood, and Arya Stark would not let the world burn without a fight. King's Landing stood in the distance, golden and calm under the morning sun, as if unaware of the storm about to fall from the skies. Arya stared at it from the deck of the ship, her face hard, her eyes cold. She had once dreamed of reaching this city with one goal, to kill Cersei Lannister, but now the plan had twisted. The queen she feared wasn't sitting on the Iron Throne anymore. She stood behind her, Daenerys, the Dragon Queen. Arya watched from the battlements as Daenerys paced along the Dragonstone cliff before their departure. The night before had been silent, no final speech, no last talks with Tyrion. She had already decided what she was going to do. Arya could see it in her eyes. Jon, however, still hoped. He believed in mercy. He still thought Daenerys would choose to rule with heart, not fire. Arya didn't argue anymore. She knew trying to change Jon's mind was like trying to stop winter. As they rode into the city gates under the disguise of civilians, Arya and the Hound moved through the crowd in silence. She had found him again at the edge of the marching army, rough as ever, older now, but still full of hate. They both had a purpose in this doomed city. His was revenge. Hers was protection. "This city's going to burn," he said to her as they crossed the Red Keep's outer wall. "You still want to be here when that dragon screams?" Arya looked ahead. "I'm not here for Cersei anymore." Sandor gave her a long look. "You planning to stop that firestorm all by yourself?" Arya didn't answer. The bell of surrender rang not long after they entered. Arya heard it echo through the streets like a ghostly cry. The people of King's Landing threw down their swords. The Lannister soldiers dropped their weapons and raised their hands. The war was over. But Daenerys didn't stop. High above the city, Drogon roared once, loud and furious, and then the fire began. Arya watched in shock as flames swallowed the streets, buildings, homes. She saw children running, women screaming, old men dragged through the dust. The dragon circled again and again, fire pouring from its mouth like the anger of gods. Jon's voice screamed in the distance, yelling for the men to pull back. The Unsullied did not stop. Grey Worm led the slaughter like a machine, blade moving through the air with no pause. It was not war, it was murder. Arya ran through the chaos, dodging falling beams and flying ash. Smoke choked her lungs. Blood coated the stones. The ground shook as Drogon landed on the Red Keep and screamed fire into its heart. Arya coughed and stumbled, helping a woman and her daughter from the rubble. The child clung to her, crying. Arya held her tightly, guiding them through an alley. Then the building behind them exploded. Arya hit the ground hard. The woman and child were gone, burned in an instant. She lay there, covered in ash, staring at the grey sky. Her ears rang. Her heart pounded. She sat up slowly, staring at what was left of the peaceful city Daenerys had promised to free. This wasn't freedom. This was tyranny in dragon skin. She stood and moved like a ghost through the streets, her eyes wide, her face pale with fury. Every step brought her closer to one truth. Daenerys could not be queen. Arya had seen this kind of madness before. She had killed men who used power as a weapon. But this was worse, because Daenerys had burned innocent people while calling it justice. Arya found Jon among the wreckage. He was on his knees, staring at the bodies around him, soldiers, villagers, even one of his own men who tried to stop the killing. His sword hung at his side, forgotten. She knelt beside him. "She's not your queen anymore," Arya whispered, her voice like ice. Jon didn't look at her. "She burned them," he murmured. "They surrendered, and she burned them." Arya looked at him with quiet fury. "If you don't stop her, I will." Jon finally turned, his eyes full of pain. "You'd kill her?" Arya didn't blink. "If I must." He looked away, broken. Arya stood and left him there, walking through the burning remains of a once-living city. The air stank of ash and death. The time for watching was over. Now came the time for choices, and Arya Stark had already made hers. The city smoldered for 2 days. Ash fell from the sky like snow. King's Landing was dead, not conquered, not defeated, erased. Arya walked through its ruins like a ghost, stepping over blackened bodies, burnt-out carts, and collapsed walls. Every street held the same silence, a silence that screamed louder than fire. She found her way back to the Red Keep, or what was left of it. The once grand palace was broken, its towers cracked, its halls buried. Smoke still rose from the bones of the building. Arya climbed carefully over the rubble, her eyes scanning for movement, survivors, guards, or worse. At the top, near a shattered balcony, she saw her. Daenerys. She stood with Drogon beside her, wings spread wide like a shadow over the city. Jon was approaching her slowly, steps heavy, heart torn in two. Arya stayed hidden behind a fallen pillar, close enough to hear, but far enough to remain unseen. Daenerys looked out at the ruins as if she saw something no one else could. Not death, not destruction. A beginning. "This is our freedom," she said, voice soft but filled with dangerous certainty. "They will never hurt us again." Jon's voice was hollow. "You burned them alive, women, children. They chose loyalty to a tyrant. I gave them mercy," she replied. "Not with rage, but with belief. They'll be remembered as the sacrifice that built a better world." Arya felt her hand slip toward her dagger. Jon took another step closer. "What if they remember you as the tyrant?" Daenerys turned sharply, her eyes flashing. "I am not Cersei." Arya had heard that before. Every killer said they weren't like the last. Every monster thought they were the savior. Jon's voice cracked. "You've become what we fought against." Daenerys stepped forward. "I freed them, Jon. I freed you. And now we build something new, together." Jon looked at her, pain flooding his face. Arya saw it. He still loved her. That was the danger. He stepped closer, held her hands, whispered something Arya couldn't hear, and then he stabbed her, right in the heart. Daenerys gasped, eyes wide in shock. She touched her chest as blood spilled down her silver dress. Jon held her as she fell, tears in his eyes, lips trembling. Drogon let out a scream so loud it shook the stones. Arya didn't move. She watched cold and still as Jon knelt over Daenerys, her life slipping away in his arms. Drogon approached, sniffing her body, crying in a voice that echoed through the shattered castle. Then, suddenly, he turned toward Jon. Arya leaped from her hiding place, shouting, "No!" Drogon let out another scream, but instead of killing Jon, he breathed fire toward the Iron Throne. The metal melted like wax, dripping into nothing. Then, with one final, heart-wrenching roar, Drogon picked up Daenerys' body in his claws and flew away, disappearing into the ash-filled sky. Arya stood there, breathing hard, her dagger still in her hand. Jon fell to his knees, blood on his hands, tears on his face. It was done. The Dragon Queen was dead. The city had no ruler, no throne, no crown, only ashes. Later that day, Jon was arrested by Grey Worm and the remaining Unsullied. Tyrion, too. The council was formed. Lords and ladies of Westeros gathered in the Dragon Pit to decide what came next. Arya sat beside Sansa and Bran, silent and watchful. When they asked who should rule, Arya said nothing. When Tyrion nominated Bran, she didn't argue. Her war was done. After the council, Arya stood with Jon before he was sent into exile. They didn't hug. They didn't cry. They just looked at each other, knowing they had both lost too much. "I didn't want it to end like this," Jon whispered. "It never ends the way we want," Arya said. Jon nodded. "Where will you go?" "West," Arya replied, "where the maps stop." He smiled softly. Still chasing the unknown, she smiled back, still running from it. And then she turned and walked away, not toward home, not toward peace, but into the unknown. Because Arya Stark wasn't made for thrones or crowns. She was made for roads that had never been walked. The sea stretched endlessly before her, vast and silver beneath a quiet sky. Arya stood at the bow of the ship, wind tugging at her hair, the salt air sharp in her lungs. Behind her, Westeros faded into a memory, a land of fire, betrayal, and blood. She didn't look back. There was nothing left for her there. Not Jon, who had vanished into the snow with Ghost and the wildlings. Not Sansa, who now ruled the north as queen in Winterfell. Not Bran, who sat on a throne built on silence and secrets. And definitely not peace. Arya had never belonged in palaces or courts. Even when she was a girl, stitching dresses in Winterfell, she'd known deep down her road would be different. Harder, wilder. Now she was finally on it. The crew of the ship avoided her. They called her Wolf Girl or the Silent One. They had heard rumors that she once killed a king, that she danced with death, that she could change her face. Arya didn't confirm or deny any of it. Let them wonder. It was safer that way. For weeks, the ship sailed west, past the Sunset Sea, into waters no map had drawn. The captain, a grizzled old man with one good eye, began to lose faith by the 10th week. "There's nothing out here," he muttered. "No land, no birds, no gods, just water." Arya looked at him with calm eyes. "You can turn back if you want, and leave you to die in the middle of nowhere." She shrugged. "I've died before." He didn't ask what she meant. Then came the storm. It hit in the night. Fierce winds, black waves, lightning like daggers in the sky. The ship was tossed like a toy. Arya tied herself to the mast, refusing to be swept overboard. Rain stung her eyes. Wood cracked. Men screamed. The sails tore apart, and still she held on. Somewhere in the madness, she blacked out. When she woke, the world was still. The sky was gray, but calm. The waves gentle. The ship was in pieces, half the crew gone, the captain dead. Arya sat among the wreckage, soaked and bruised, blinking at the impossible sight before her. Land, a jagged coastline, thick with mist and towering cliffs. It was not the kind of place one stumbled upon. It was the kind of place meant to be forgotten. Arya took what supplies she could, filled a pack, and rowed to shore using a splintered piece of wood. When her boots touched the sand, something shifted inside her. A quiet feeling, not fear, not excitement, purpose. The land was strange, trees with bark like silver, birds that sounded like they were whispering. The air itself felt heavy, not with danger, but with age, as if the place had existed long before people. She explored carefully, knife always in hand, senses sharp. Days passed. She hunted small animals, drank from cold springs, slept with one eye open. But she wasn't alone. At night, she saw them. Figures in the trees. Not men, not animals, something in between. They didn't speak, they didn't move when she drew her blade. But they were watching, always watching. On the 5th night, Arya built a small fire. She sat beside it, sharpening her dagger. Her face was blank, calm, but inside, questions swirled. Why was she here? What was this place? And why did it feel like something had called her? That night, she dreamed. In her dream, she stood in a great hall made of stone and roots. Faces lined the walls, thousands of them, but not dead faces. Living ones. They watched her, not with fear or anger, but recognition. A woman stood at the end of the hall. Pale eyes, grey hair braided with feathers. She said no words. But Arya understood. "You are not done," the voice in her head whispered. "Death follows you, but so does balance." Arya woke with a gasp. The fire had gone out, but in the ash, someone, or something, had left a symbol. A circle carved with a sharp point through the middle. She stared at it, heart pounding. Whatever this land was, it was no myth. It was a secret. And Arya Stark had found it. Arya didn't sleep after that. The mark in the ashes burned itself into her mind. A circle pierced by a single sharp line. It meant something, though she didn't know what yet. She only knew one thing. Someone had been here. Someone had watched her sleep and left a message. She wasn't afraid, but she was ready. The next morning, the mist was thicker than ever, clinging to her skin like wet cloth. The trees around her bent unnaturally, twisted into shapes that whispered of old magic. Not like the Red Priest's fire or the Maester's logic, something older, wilder. The kind of power that didn't ask for prayers, only silence. She followed a deer trail deeper inland. Days passed. Time felt different here, slower, dreamlike. Her food was running low, but Arya hunted well. Her feet moved like memory through the forest, guided by instinct stronger than thought. And then she saw it, a stone structure, half buried, covered in moss and vines. It was shaped like a small temple, but nothing like any Westerosi design. The walls were carved with patterns of spirals, circles, and blades. At the center of the doorway, that same symbol again, the circle and the line. Arya stepped inside. The moment she crossed the threshold, a cold wave washed over her, not on her skin, but inside her bones. She kept moving, blade in hand. The room inside was dark, but not empty. Statues lined the walls, not of gods, not of kings, of warriors. Men, women, even children, each one holding a different weapon. A bow, a dagger, a spear, a sword. None looked like they were meant to be worshipped. They looked like they were meant to warn. At the center stood a raised platform. On it, a mask, white, plain, no eye holes. Arya approached slowly. She didn't touch it, not yet. Something told her this wasn't just an artifact. It was a test, a gate, and the moment she claimed it, something would change. A voice echoed behind her. "Do you know who you are?" Arya turned sharply, blade raised. An old woman stood in the doorway, cloaked in grey furs with beads hanging from her hair. Her eyes were pale, not blind, but shining like moonlight on still water. Arya didn't answer. The woman stepped forward. "You've worn many faces, killed many names, but what are you now, girl of no one?" Arya narrowed her eyes. "I'm Arya Stark of Winterfell." The woman smiled faintly. "Are you?" Arya hesitated. "I used to be no one. I took faces. I followed the god of death, but I remembered who I was. I chose my name again." The woman nodded. "Then why did you come here? What were you hoping to find?" Arya thought about it. The war, the fire, the throne, Jon. Daenerys, Bran's cold crown, the quiet goodbyes, the sea, the storm. "I was running," Arya said honestly, "from the world, from myself." "And now?" the woman asked. Arya looked at the mask. "Now I think I'm meant to find something, or become something. The woman walked to the platform and picked up the mask. This is not like the ones you've worn before. This isn't to hide who you are. This one shows the truth. Arya stepped forward. What truth? The woman placed the mask in her hands. That you were not trained by death. You were chosen by it. Arya felt the weight of the mask. It was heavy, but not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. It pulsed in her palm as if alive. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you didn't kill for power," the woman said. "You killed for justice, for mercy, for survival. You became death's balance." Arya looked up at her, heart racing. "What do I do with it?" The woman stepped back. "You go where death has no face. You go where life clings without mercy. You bring the end when the end is denied." A cold wind blew through the temple. Arya placed the mask in her satchel and turned to leave. The woman was already gone. Outside, the mist had cleared. The land stretched wide before her, rivers, strange mountains, and black forests filled with ancient sounds. Creatures howled in the distance. Unknown, unseen, untouched, Arya tightened her cloak. This place wasn't just west of Westeros. It was beyond everything anyone had ever known. And whatever slept in these forgotten lands was finally waking up. The forest ahead pulsed with a life Arya had never felt before. Not in Winterfell's icy woods, not in Bravos's shadowed alleys, not even in the war-scarred fields of Westeros. This place breathed beneath her feet. It watched, it remembered, and Arya felt it pressing against her skin like invisible hands, testing her, as if the land itself wanted to know, was she hunter or hunted? She kept moving. The mask lay hidden in her satchel, but its presence never left her. It seemed to warm and cool with her heartbeat. At night, her dreams were filled with faces she'd never seen, tall beings made of shadow and bone, creatures with eyes like lanterns, cities carved into mountains that hummed with ancient songs. And the whisper was always there. "You are death's balance. Where life festers, you must cut." Arya didn't know what it meant, not yet, but the further she traveled, the more she understood this wasn't just a land untouched by maps. It was a place untouched by death. She saw signs, bones of massive beasts that should have rotted centuries ago, still fresh and full of color, animals wounded in battle, bleeding but never dying. A fox she'd hunted 3 days ago reappeared, the same wound on its side. Unchanged, as if time had frozen around it. Nothing died here, and that was the problem. One evening, she reached a valley bathed in violet mist. In its center stood a massive tree, taller than any tower she'd ever seen, with bark black as coal and leaves like blood. Beneath it stood the same woman from the temple, but now she wore the mask. Arya approached slowly, hand on needle. "You feel it now," the woman said, her voice echoing across the quiet valley. "This place is wrong." Arya nodded. "Nothing ends here. Everything just keeps going." "This land was sealed long ago by those who feared death," the woman explained. "They locked it away, thinking they could live forever. But now the lock has cracked. Life festers here, twisted, endless. A curse dressed as a miracle." Arya looked around. "So why me? Why not someone with an army? A hero?" The woman smiled beneath the mask. "Because you are not a hero. You are the blade in the dark, the whisper before silence, and that is what this place needs." She stepped aside, revealing a stone altar at the tree's base. On it lay a man, ancient but alive. His skin was cracked like dry earth, his veins glowing with golden light, but his chest still rose, still fell. "He is the heart of this land," the woman whispered. "He drank from a forbidden spring. He cannot die, and so nothing else can." Arya stared at him. You want me to kill him. Not want, the woman said. Need. Arya stepped forward slowly. The man didn't speak. His eyes opened, but there was no anger. Only peace, like someone long past begging for death. She thought of all the people she had killed. Some deserved it. Some hadn't. But this was something else. This was mercy. She drew the dagger, the same one she used on the Night King, and placed it over his heart. His lips moved. She leaned close. "Thank you," he whispered. Then she drove the blade in. The moment it pierced his chest, the sky broke open. The tree let out a deep, rumbling groan, and its blood-red leaves began to fall, slowly turning to ash in the wind. The earth trembled. Far in the distance, Arya heard the screams of beasts, not of pain, but of release. Like a great breath being exhaled after 1,000 years, death had returned, not as a punishment, but as a promise. The woman turned to her. "It is done. The balance is restored." Arya wiped the blade clean. "Now what?" The woman removed the mask and handed it to Arya. "Now, you carry it. Where death is broken, you will go. Where people suffer from life that will not end, you will bring the end they beg for." Arya stared at the mask. She understood now. She had never been a princess, never been a knight. She was something else. A bringer of mercy. A shadow that walked where the gods would not. She placed the mask in her pack, turned her back on the valley, and walked into the wild. She was Arya Stark. No one, someone, death's chosen, and her journey was far from over.